Steven Soderbergh has done a lot of things since making his debut in 1989 with Sex, Lies, and Videotape. He's made grown-up dramas, art house films, historical dramas, crime flicks, a science fiction tale, and even mainstream Oscar-winning hits. One thing he hasn't done yet is repeat himself.
I'm not sure making a sequel is repeating yourself.
Well, we'll debate that today as we talk about Soderbergh's 2004 movie Ocean's 12. Welcome to the Filmographers podcast, where we study a director's entire career, one film at a time. I'm Keir Graff.
And I'm Michael Moreci. In our first season, we're turning the spotlight on Steven Soderbergh, one of Hollywood's most fascinating and versatile directors. We discuss why each of his films succeeded or failed, always looking at them in the context of the Hollywood landscape at the time they were released.
As always, we want to know how working artists make a living doing what they love, because we are working artists who make a living doing what we love. We hope you'll join us on our journey to watch or rewatch all of Soderbergh's movies. And be warned, we do share spoilers. Mike, just in case someone listening hasn't watched this one on an airline or seen it on late night cable TV before, please kick us off with your one-sentence summary.
The Oceans Band is back and looking to con and heist their way out of trouble, this time trading Vegas glitz for Euro chic, while Soderbergh attempts to rewrite the wildly successful playbook he arguably perfected in 2001 with Ocean's 11.
Mike, I don't know why they didn't use that for the tagline in all their marketing materials. It's perfection.
Unfortunately, it took me 20 years to write it, so it's
Yep. I want my money back. The money that your friend stole from me. $160 million with interest. I'm not the only person in the world looking for Ocean's 11.
We need a job. We need a high-paying job.
Now we're too hot to work anywhere in this country.
Where are we going?
You're doing recon work on our anniversary?
Taz.
And you are Mr.
Miguel Diaz. What's your name?
Craig.
Greg. Let me ask you something. Do you have safe deposit boxes here?
It's not in my nature to be mysterious, but I can't talk about it, and I can't talk about why. Ooh. I'd really like to play a more central role this time around. Okay, I don't even understand what happened in there. What did I say?
Next time I see you, I'm arresting you.
That means it's yes. Well, you better.
I want it all back. Okay, because I have a whole network. Get out of my car. Thank you.
How you doing? You doing all right?
Oh, I feel great. For a dead man.
Okay, good.
Now, you told me that he called it Ocean 11. Now, who decided that?
That's a good point.
You're gonna have to play a small role in this thing.
Small role. Who am I supposed to be?
Well,
What are we stealing?
Mike, today I'm going to skip the part of the podcast where we reintroduce all the characters, gin up a far-fetched premise, and set the plot in motion. I don't think anybody really cares about the ins and outs of how Ocean's 12 came together. Just tell me this. Do you like it?
I actually did. Potentially, I haven't seen this movie since the theaters, and I remember specifically seeing it in theaters, and I remember really disliking it. As many people did at the time, and we'll get into that later. This is a movie that has been kind of rediscovered, though I don't know if it's justifiably rediscovered. But watching it now with the advantage of a lot of time and a lot more knowledge about Steven Soderbergh's ins and outs, I enjoyed it more than I anticipated enjoying it, knowing my first visceral gut reaction to it way back when. I like the European feel. I like the style. I like that they, were bold to switch it up and go to a new place and find a new feel. When I first saw it, I didn't really get that feel that he was going after. I mean, even though I was a huge and still am a huge Hitchcock fan, I didn't really get the To Catch a Thief thing, threading around. I didn't even and I hadn't seen Danger Diabolic yet, which is kind of, in the same area. I'm older and wiser now, obviously. And well, at least one of those two things. At least older. So I see more of what he's doing, what he being Soderbergh, and it's fun. It's fun. It's light and airy the way Ocean's 11 was, but there's some strains that come with that. We'll get to. I like the Night Fox. I thought that was really cool. I like to introduce the one thing that I really loved about Ocean's 11, and I really like here, and I wish they had done more with. I feel like Ocean's 12 is a tale of two movies, or maybe even four movies, because I feel like there's some really great stuff and some missed opportunities and some good and some bad. There's a lot of peaks and valleys in this movie. But the one thing I loved about Ocean's 11 was this world that just where con men and master criminals and heists and art thefts and all this kind of stuff seems to be just pretty common.
Sure.
And I think that's kind of cool. If you're going to have this world where someone's going to rob 3 casinos at once, I think you have to build a world where it's that becomes a thing. I mean, not that happens every day, but there are master criminals and things like that.
Like you're building a defense for my coming attack.
No, because actually this is really good stuff for the ends. So they have the European thief, who of course comes from basically aristocracy and is doing it just for fun, and it feels very European and very cool. And I really like that. I really liked what they did with that, introducing that character. I wish he being the Night Fox was handled better. And we'll get to that in a bit, but I did like the idea of that and the way they kind of leaned into this particular world. But like I said, I don't want to be too harsh, because I did enjoy it. It's a movie that you probably shouldn't look at too closely, but that's what we do here. So we are going to look at it closely. There are some things that I had issues with. For all the good things, it balances out with the bad. It just feels, like I said, the peaks and valleys, it's wildly uneven. There's sequences that really work, that I really enjoyed, and then they trade that in for sequences that are really just do not work, and we'll get into the specifics of that. But also big picture, I don't want to get too macro yet, but big picture, it suffers the worst. I feel like if you're making a sequel, the worst thing you can do is this try to recreate the magic, specifically this try-hardness that Ocean's 12 really has. The angle that gets brought up and dropped really quickly is Linus being a leader. And that whole thing is just, it wants to be cheeky, but just feels like it's trying to tread the same ground of they're trying to bring him into the rapport of Brad Pitt and George Clooney, in the way they had do we need one more? Do you think we need one more? We need one more. That kind of stuff utterly did not work. The whole Lost in Translation bit, where they tell stories that are nonsense but are code, was awful. I mean, I couldn't imagine. I could imagine a million different things you could have done to accomplish something more compelling. And it's one of many things that, again, I don't want to get too macro, but was bad. And they're just trying hard to be hey, remember how cheeky and fun? And no.
I mean, in Matt Damon's defense, I agree with you generally that those things don't come off as well as intended. I think he is really game, and he's kind of funny in isolation, but overall the bits don't work. It's great to me because he's he was coming off a Bourne movie. He's a pretty big star, but he's willing to make himself totally subordinate and the butt of the joke, which I appreciated, but it ultimately doesn't mean it works in the movie.
No, I think he's, of the major players, I feel like he's the only one who's really given us anything in this movie. The Julia Roberts bit was another one, which that was probably worse. That was probably worse. Yeah, I mean, that's a whole thing. That's a hole in the middle of the film. That's just, I don't know who thought that was a good idea, but they were wrong.
Apparently Soderbergh really fought for that. He fought the studio to have the Julia Roberts plays Julia Roberts angle. So that one's on you, Steve.
Yeah, wow. Okay. Wow. I don't know. I think I rethink this entire podcast because that was so bad. But yeah, I mean, I can go into a lot of other stuff, but I want you to get in. I mean, the only thing I'll say, sidelining Bernie Mac, I really hope that was a scheduling reason, because what the hell? Why?
I have insight on that, fortunately. Yeah, because I agree completely. My first rewatch, I same thing. Just like, come on, he's one of the funniest, brightest sparks in the first movie, in my opinion, and he's great in his scenes here. But he did have a serious scheduling conflict, so that kept him away from it. And then he actually became ill during shooting. So the scene where they're in the Amsterdam hotel room and he's in the quote unquote in the bathroom, they were shooting around him being actually probably in the bathroom. He was actually, they didn't, I don't know the nature of his illness, but apparently he became ill enough that they had to shoot around him at times. So
that's unfortunate. Okay. Well, that makes it,
it's still a problem with the movie. Ultimately, there's not enough Bernie Mac in it.
Right. At least it's not like on the level with Soderbergh deciding not, to fight for the Julia Roberts thing. Like, it wasn't like, at least wasn't a conscious mistake.
That was not that was out of his control.
Yeah. So anyway, Uneven. I enjoyed it because superficially I enjoyed it, but you look too closely and the fabric really does come undone pretty easily.
We were aware of the fact that we've set up a situation in which two of our lead characters are not involved in the physical plot climax of the movie, which most people would tell you is a stupid thing to do, but we did it anyway.
It's an interesting take because, like, I don't think I saw it when it came out. I saw it, I had seen it, of course, at some point. I think I saw it probably on a rental or whatever, and I remember thinking like, it's fun, just kind of not as good as the first one. I didn't really dislike it or like it that much. I just thought it was relatively pleasant way to pass 2 hours. And then if the original Ocean's 11 had never existed, I probably would have thought it was pretty good. But I feel like the bar was set so high by the first Ocean's 11, Soderbergh's first Ocean's 11. That is just such a fun movie. And I just think like tonally kind of perfect. He just couldn't clear it this time. In rewatching it for the pod, I ended up feeling really irritated with it. I definitely have some gripes. I will concede that there are some individual set pieces that are very funny. Bernie Mac getting his nails done and telling this like story that's out of left field. Like I enjoyed that 90 seconds. It's not like an unpleasant watching experience, but I found myself really frustrated enough that I started kind of categorizing my gripes while I was watching it. And that's not a good sign. It starts way too slowly. I mean, the first movie is kind of a model of how to get the heist thing underway. And this one, like having Benedict show up with each one of the characters. I mean, yeah, Soderbergh's idea is to kind of show us what they've been doing since the original movie. And that's sort of fun. But not only does it just take too long to kind of get things going, but it also is implausible because in the world of cell phones, somebody would call the rest of them and say, hey, he's on to us. So it's just kind of like it's a bit thin.
Yeah.
And to me, similarly with the first movie, the stakes just don't feel as urgent as they should. Like yet again, Benedict feels like a papered tiger. I just feel like there's no reason to fear him. What I want is, I mean, I know it's a comedy, but still think about the cornfield burial alive scene in Casino, the Scorsese film, right? Like that's a mob boss you're going to be afraid of. Whereas this guy, it's like, well, what's he going to do? Poke me with his cane? I mean, he's irritating.
Do you think his fashion sense is intimidating?
Definitely. Although I don't know, I think Rusty could go toe to toe with him in bad fashion choices.
Yeah, the silk shirt's got to be a little much.
Yeah, and at one point I swear he was wearing a leather shirt, but it probably was a shiny silk shirt. I don't know.
Yeah, not great. I did like that we talked about in Ocean's 11 how badly Andy Garcia was dressed himself, whatever the case may be. Yeah. And he seemed to like triple down on it this time.
Yeah, they really did.
And I was like, I like it.
I think the costumer is having fun, and that's okay. That's okay.
I liked it.
But just in terms of like the fact that these guys are actually quaking in their boots enough, well, we got to give him the money back because he says so. We need some real stakes and some genuine sense of danger, even in a comedy, to understand why they would be like, well, okay, we'll give you back this crazy amount of money we stole from you. I just didn't buy it. It's overcomplicated. We don't need the Catherine Zeta-Jones character or backstory, I don't think, although that is, of course, central to Soderbergh's vision for this whole movie. And we can talk in a little bit about how that came together. They were trying to make this Brad Pitt's movie in the way the first one is George Clooney's, but it felt a little reductive to have the Rusty's girl versus Danny's girl equivalence, kind of.
Yeah, and I don't know that it really... Again, it's like the script, the two biggest things for me were script and performance. And this is a thing of the script, because like it really doesn't even know if it's even Brad Pitt's movie or Brad Pitt's story or Catherine Zeta-Jones' story ultimately, because who has any emotional stakes? Brad Pitt seems to be interested in her because she's like hot and cool. But that's about it, like where Catherine Zeta-Jones actually has like an emotional storyline, for better or worse, that, they kind of end up closing in a overly complicated way, but at least she had something.
Yeah. Well, in the commentary, Soderbergh and screenwriter George Nolfi, and again, I'll get into that more in a little bit, but they kind of talk about how they both agree that it's sort of secretly Zeta-Jones's character's movie, and I wish I were better at remembering character names off the top of my head, but that to me just seems like kind of a fundamental flaw where you're like, well, it's secretly about this character. Really? I mean, I agree with you that you shouldn't try to do like exactly the same thing as the first movie, and I do applaud them for trying to do different things. I think they tried to do too many different things, and ultimately it's Ocean's 11. Maybe you're trying for some gender parity or something like that, but it's like some movie about this gang who we've kind of come to know and love. They're funny. They all have these individual bits. Whereas in this movie, we end up losing a lot of the guys who are so funny. Casey Affleck and Scott Conn in the first one, they're really hilarious in the first one. And this one, don't matter.
No. And they didn't stare at a fountain once in this movie.
There was no fountain staring.
No fountain staring. There had to have been a fountain in Europe somewhere. For God's sake.
Okay, now you're starting to make fun of my gripes, but I have
No,
more.
I'm not, because I agree with you. No. They were all sidelined. I mean, even like it's, it's trying to wear too many hats. And I think you put it on, you said it, something that was in my mind that is very clear. Like, it's admirable to try to do something different, but like they're just trying to do too many things different. It's like the problem that I had with Solaris, where it's like, it's asking existential questions, but like, too many existential questions. Like, what is the question? Like, what is the story of Ocean's 12? I don't know.
And you've already got a difficult project when you've got a movie with 11 characters, then you add a 12th character, and then you try to instead of just making them an additional member of the gang, you're trying to create this rich backstory for them that ends up being what the movie is really about, while still paying some homage to all the other characters and keeping them involved. There are times when it just feels like there are more characters than they know what to do with. And so I really think that it's, spinning plates or whatever. It's very hard to keep it focused enough. And part of the fun of an ensemble big caper film like this is that people show up and do something funny or interesting and then step off stage again. But that's a really difficult thing to choreograph. And ultimately, I think the choreography was too much. Because on that note, another big introduction, a character they introduced is the Night Fox, which I know you enjoyed that aspect. To me, there were a couple of things I didn't like about it. One is that you're trying to add yet another storyline, which I think is kind of overstuffed. But I also just didn't quite feel like the idea of pitting Danny Ocean against this suave European master criminal vibed correctly. I felt like they were kind of mashing up eras, because in the way that Ocean's 11 is kind of this cool 60s movie, they're trying to make this more of a classy European 50s movie. You talked about To Catch a Thief a moment ago. And so it feels like they're kind of two clashing tones of movies. And like, to me, it's apples and oranges, because Danny Ocean may be a master thief allegedly, but I feel like these guys are almost more like con men or something. And the Night Fox being this Pink Panther style guy who, you know, like sneaks into places and steals this kind of amazing, you know, he's an amazing thief in this classic mold. The competition between them just kind of didn't make sense. And I keep teasing this. We'll get to the reason for that in a moment. I'm still on my list of gripes, and I have to get through my list of gripes.
Go for it.
The evading lasers joke is funny, but I felt like it wasn't funny enough to justify all the setup.
Yeah, you don't need to see him prepare. If he's just a master thief and cat burglar, then he should just be able to do that. We don't need to see him stretching and like doing the practice, and then we see him do it. Like, oh, that's why he was doing all those things. It's like
I think tonally, it's this. They were trying to do what Spielberg did perfectly in Raiders of the Lost Ark, where Indy's gone through all of this, hell and back, and then suddenly this guy with this giant sword, and you think, oh God, he doesn't have the energy for this one big thing, and then he pulls out the gun and shoots him, and it's like this perfect comic note,
right?
And then I think that's kind of what they were going for, like this big buildup, and then they're going to deflate it, like, haha, he didn't have to go through all these lasers. And yes, the evading lasers joke. I mean, Catherine Zeta-Jones did that. She made that one famous in that movie. She was
with Sean Connery. Entrapment.
Yeah. That is such a cliche that I'm happy to see that sent up. But again, it just was like too much buildup, not enough payoff. As you said, we're both in complete agreement. I hate the winking Julia Roberts plays Julia Roberts angle. As somebody else observed, if Tess looks like the real Julia Roberts, aren't we suddenly in a world where Danny looks like George Clooney and Rusty looks like Brad Pitt? It's like one of those time travel mind benders. Like if you accept this one thing, then they all look like the people that they're actually supposed to be. And it also just feels so insidery and cute and cloying and like, oh, now we're just rich people, famous movie stars hanging out with other famous movie stars. And look, it's Bruce Willis.
Yeah.
And in the commentary, Soderbergh really defends that. I mean, he pushed for it. He kind of feels annoyed with people. I mean, Soderbergh is always very charitable towards people's disagreements with his decisions, but one gets the sense that he's actually a little grumpy about this because so many people didn't like it. But Steve, you were wrong.
Yeah, the logic of it all just doesn't work. And it's not fun or clever enough to really, because it ends up, the reason she does it ends up being a nothing burger or decoy or something like that. I'm not even quite sure why, they absolutely needed to do that. And we'll talk about the movie's resolution soon enough. But it's a lot. It's much ado about nothing, why even do that? Take that kind of swing.
Yeah, I mean, I think he just thought it was going to be the edgier choice because originally they were going to have her play some like European countess or something like that. And he said, oh, this will be more fun and more edgy, but he got a lot of pushback and I think he should have listened to the pushback. My final big gripe, I think, is that the movie, and this is a big one, I think it's my biggest gripe, is that the movie doesn't really play fair with the audience. In the world of mystery writing, there's a rule that you must play fair with the reader in writing a mystery novel. And that is that you have to give them all the clues to kind of solve the mystery. So you're not suddenly making a Deus Ex Machina and just like, look, here's what happened. They've got to have a chance at it, even if they're never going to really solve it. It's got to be somewhat achievable. It is a staple of the heist movie to fool the viewer a little bit. I mean, Ocean's 11 does that really nicely when they spin back and show us that what we think we saw is not what we saw, fooling us along with Terry Benedict. However, that did give us pretty much all the clues we needed to figure that out. In Ocean's 11, they're rehearsing their heist in an actual perfect replica of the actual vault at the Bellagio, where you might be saying to yourself, why would they need to build this perfect replica just to practice the heist? Well, it's giving you the clue you need to figure out the ending. Ocean's 12, to me, pretty much just cheats because it tells us that a large portion of the movie we just watched, like a lot of the movie, didn't happen at all the way it was shown, without really giving us a chance to figure it out. Yes, they give us some clues, like on second or third viewing, you might notice the backpack that Matt Damon's character swaps, on a chair. The camera zooms in on the backpack a few scenes before the final reveal, but I didn't even register it the first time that I watched the movie because I didn't know the significance of it.
No, and I call a complete and utter bullshit on that total premise that they built up this egg and then like how it's gonna be transport and secure, but ultimately it's on a train with some dude wearing a sleeveless jacket. Like, no, man. No.
Yeah, the guy would at least have sleeves.
Yeah, he would have sleeves on that jacket.
It's funny because like, so Roger Ebert, I think we should start calling him Saint Roger, because we both love him so much and we quote him all the time, and hopefully he's looking down favorably on this podcast.
I think he would.
But he noted all this stuff, but then for some reason decided it was all fine. In his review, he wrote, quote, "With some movies, you begin to notice implausibilities. With others, you begin to admire them." For example, since Benedict eventually pays a personal call on each and every one of the original 11, why don't Danny and Tess simply telephone the other 9 and warn them Benedict is coming? The reason you don't want to ask that question is because it would prevent the movie from introducing all the crooks and showing us what they're doing now, end quote. But Roger, what about those of us who do ask that question?
Yeah, I don't really like that like hand waving. It's like, just don't ask, just don't, but that's the point. And I think that's the point of, I don't like, and we've talked about this before, like the idea that movies are puzzles to be solved. Like, aha, I beat it. I got you. I found the plot hole. Now I can go make a shitty YouTube video. You know, like I don't like that, but I also don't want to be, I think you said it best, cheated. And I do think this movie, the ending does cheat you. It does play a bad game on the audience. I can see an argument to the contrary. And I was going to bring this up later, but I think this is a good time to do it. Matt Singer, an author who I like, who I incidentally wrote the book, a recent book on Roger Ebert and Gene Siskel called Opposable Thumbs. And it's about like basically covers their career from start till the end. And it's really, really good. I really like it a lot. And I like Matt as a writer quite a bit. And he's one of the people who has recently defended Ocean's 12 as like, it's actually really good. I think his ideas are interesting. I don't think he's accurate. I don't think there's a middle ground here, because he's kind of reacting to Ocean's 12 being called, like, many publications, or maybe not many, but a few have named it one of the worst sequels of all time.
Yes.
And he's like, it's actually not. And I think he's right in that. I don't think, shit, man, there are worse sequels than this.
Yeah, without question.
Without question. But he brings up an interesting point that I really do like, that he's like, look, if you're making a movie like this, ultimately, the audience knows where you're going, right? It's going to be the sleight of hand. It's going to be this. So why not just not care? Why not just throw that out the window and say, ultimately in the end, be like, yeah, here's what happened, but lean instead on other things. Now, I actually think that's an interesting idea, and I actually don't mind if that's what it did. I mean, I do mind because I still think it was a dirty trick, and with the way they did it. Mm-hmm. But if you take his premise of like, hey, you know where this is going to go, so why not just find something else to do interesting around it? My problem is they didn't find anything interesting to do around it.
Yeah.
You know,
every movie requires suspension of disbelief, right? And certainly a heist movie, I mean, Ocean's 11 requires an immense suspension of disbelief, because could these characters be in that many places on such short notice and changing costumes and moving around, and like and every viewer is going to have a different place where they kind of draw the line in the sand. You know, there's one reviewer who was talking about how you have to somehow accept the fact that these master thieves can show up in Amsterdam on short notice and then like get this kind of heavy equipment required to raise the jacks under this house that's on a canal on short notice. And like, how do they bankroll all this stuff and yada, yada, yada. And like, sure, you know, I guess we all just like end up at a different place where it's like, well, that's a bridge too far for me. And I'm with you. I try not to watch a movie like I'm in the Gaff Squad, because it's, you know, like, oh, the water level in the glass went down, you know, because continuity wasn't doing their job. I mean, if you focus on stuff like that, do you enjoy movies, or do you just enjoy being a scold? But at the same time, I'm honestly, like, full confession here, I write mysteries, but I'm not like the best solver of mysteries. I get so wrapped up in character and performance that I sometimes lose track of the clues. But what I want is a feeling that I was close. I want a feeling like it pretty much held together, and I could have almost put it together if I was paying more attention. This one just felt like it invalidated some of my watching experience And then it makes me feel like, well, why did I invest in the previous 30 minutes?
Right. And there's a difference between narrative rules and world rules. Like world rules, these guys are master criminals and they have, access to weird gadgets and tools and ideas and stuff like that. And they've established that this is what they do. They build vaults, they lift buildings, this is all fitting to the world. So I can accept that. But then there's narrative rules of like, see, we were playing this thing the whole time. You didn't know, and there's no way you could have known. And what really happened, they went on a train and we didn't show you it. And all the how this whole thing wraps up is like breaks, I think, obliterates any sense of narrative rules.
Mike, as so often, you have said it exactly in the way I wish I was able to articulate it. That's perfect. Narrative rules and world rules. Like they've established the rules of the world in the first movie. We now know what world they're living in. And then this movie jars us because it changes some of those rules on us.
Yeah, I agree.
One of the reasons I think it doesn't hold together as well as the first one is that the screenwriter for Ocean's 11, Ted Griffin, was writing expressly for this project. He was building on the work of the two screenwriters who wrote the miserable, terrible, rotten, no good, very bad original Ocean's 11. But he was doing something that was purpose-built for this project. The Ocean's 12 script started life as a project called Honor Among Thieves by George Nolfi, which he wrote before the first Ocean's 11 came out. And it was about it was a screenplay about a competition between two master thieves. The greatest thief in America and the greatest thief in the world comes to try to take him down on his own turf. And the American thief is being pursued by an FBI agent who's from a wealthy family or something like that.
Okay.
So you can kind of see where it's going. Jerry Weintraub, the producer of Ocean's 11, thought it could be adapted for an Ocean's sequel. That's how he tells it. Soderbergh said something about, I had this idea and I pushed for it. But so I'm not exactly clear which one of them first came across it. But in one telling that I came across, Weintraub said he was the one who found the script first. So maybe that's something we can pin down later. But regardless, they saw an idea like, oh, this could work for an Ocean's sequel. And Soderbergh says that he never had any intention of doing a sequel until they were doing promotion for Ocean's 11 and they were in Rome because they got to go to all these glamorous places to promote the movie. And he's looking out of the city and he's like, wow, what an amazing, beautiful place. What if we brought the Ocean's gang here? So that kind of started percolating in his mind. Then they found the Nolfi script. They asked Nolfi to rework it. Soderbergh and Nolfi worked very closely together. Nolfi was on set doing rewrites while they were shooting, pretty much sometimes on the day of. So that doesn't sound like an ideal situation to me as a writer. I know they worked very, very, very hard on it, but I think you were taking something that it's not a Danny Ocean story to begin with, and you've got this kind of high-flown idea about a competition between Danny Ocean and the Night Fox, and then you're saying, but it's really about this third character that we're introducing brand new, but we're also going to try to make it more of a Rusty film. I think that's just where a lot of the confusion that we talked about comes from, the fact that they didn't go to George Nolfi or Ted Griffin and say, hey, we want to do a sequel and we think it should be about these kinds of themes.
Yeah, I mean, hell, you can even throw in the Linus stuff. It's like, oh, also we're going to have Linus have this thread where he becomes like, elevated to the status of Rusty and Danny. No, I mean, any good story, and we've talked about this a lot, requires a certain amount of clarity. And I think that like it's maybe even more important for a sequel to really know what you're trying to do, because you just don't want to lose what the original did. You don't want to create what the original did. So it becomes you already have one version of the thing. So you have to figure out like, well, how do we make the new version of the thing? Like I said, without like just redoing the whole thing or taking it in a direction too far where nobody's interested anymore. And now it's disconnected. I just think they lost the way. They didn't have a clear vision. And it's unfortunate because like if you found a way to get the Ocean's band together more succinctly than this movie certainly did. If you found a way to do that and be like, here's Ocean's 12. Danny Ocean is the American master is pitted against the European master, and the gang's getting back together, and they have some reason why this must happen, and off we go.
Yeah.
And that's all it is. I think it would have been a far better, clearer movie. You could have gotten the cool stuff that we love, all the European stuff that we liked, had some fun, had some games, and then you just could have gotten closer to what Ocean's 11 is with that simplicity and clarity. But instead, they just kept, slapping layers of wallpaper onto it. And before you know it, it's like, well, the room's shrunk, because of all this gunk that you put on it. And, it was just too many things. It was just too many things that it's trying to do.
Well, I guess we should at least be grateful that they didn't come up with the idea that Master American Thief Danny Ocean and his 11 merry men go up against the Night Fox and his 11 European merry men.
Oh my.
Because they sure wouldn't have juggled that many storylines.
No.
There's still a lot more to explore with this, but let's first talk about the film's reception at the time.
Now, in the third film, we go back to Vegas. We have a new antagonist, and I think that's really working well. But it wouldn't have worked well if we hadn't gone somewhere else for the second one. So this is The Empire Strikes Back of the
well, there you go.
three Star Wars.
Well, that was the best of the Star Wars anyway.
I thought so, but the things about this movie that people had issues with end up being, for me, the things that I like about it. First of all, I think visually it's the best of the three films, but the weirdness of it, the oddness of it, is the very thing that I like about it. It doesn't work the way movies like this usually work.
Not at all.
If it works. But I think if you watch it over and over again, which I encourage everybody to do.
Everyone should go out and buy the DVD and
just
tell
keep,
their friends
no,
and just
they
keep
should
watching
keep watching it until they like it. That's if you didn't like it when you saw it, you just didn't watch it enough.
Yeah.
That's my line on that.
Generally speaking, people did not like this as much as Ocean's 11. You will find a surprising number of people online who say it's their favorite one, but it's fair to say the critics were divided. Stephen Hunter wrote a savage takedown for the Washington Post. I hate to read too many reviews, but I just have to read a few lines from this because it is, as I say, savage. Quote, "The pilot light of Ocean's 12 is so low a whisper could blow it out, leaving nothing on screen except a series of outtakes bereft of coherence, much less drama. It's really about hanging out and how cool it is to be a movie star, about the good fun that rich, handsome, famous people have. No one has thought much about the story at all. Instead, the movie reinvents itself about every 25 minutes, finding a new minor plot obstacle to overcome and depositing the characters into boredom and lassitude until someone could come up with another plot obstacle. Quite late into it, the movie is still introducing new characters in search of hairpin turns and unsupportable, arbitrary revelations. It all ends on one of those infuriatingly sloppy notes where, having dramatized narrative events WXYZ for us, which we have taken on good faith, it suddenly and arbitrarily delivers narrative events STUV, which completely invalidates events WXYZ. That's not cleverness, it's subterfuge," end quote.
Yeah, I mean, it is savage. And I don't know you need to be that harsh, but I mean, especially the what he says about a new plot device every 25 minutes and the subterfuge, those last two bits, it's hard to refute. It is hard to refute those. I do think that the one thing I'll say, and I know you have more stuff here, the one thing I will say that critics were a little bit unfair with is that there seemed to be like this is just an excuse for movie stars to hang out in Europe. And it's just like, movie stars can go to Europe any second they want. They don't need an excuse.
That's an excellent point. Why they didn't, I mean, George Clooney doesn't have to shoot this movie to hang out, in a villa on Lake Como because he owns one.
Right. Exactly.
There was some bad information going around that they shot the Night Fox scenes at Clooney's villa. They didn't, but apparently many of them stayed at Clooney's villa while they shot it nearby. So yeah, well said. I agree. Hunter goes too hard in this review, but on the other hand, once in a while, it's great to read a stinging takedown, and he brings it. So, fair enough. In the LA Times, Kenneth Turan wrote, A lethargic would-be entertainment, as well as a dispiriting vanity project, it is such a misfire that it makes it hard to remember what was special about its predecessor. And Lisa Schwartzbaum of Entertainment Weekly wrote, "What's on screen is lazy, second-rate, phoned in, a heist in which it's the audience whose pockets have been picked." And as we referred to earlier, it was eventually named in some lists of the worst sequels of all time, including Entertainment Weekly's. It's definitely not one of my favorite sequels. I don't know if it's one of the worst of all time. Where do you think it would rank, Mike, on the sequels?
Oh man. I mean, I've said it right, not in the worst. I mean, everyone's being a little dramatic. I think there must have been some streak of really good movies coming out that these critics had bottled up some savagery within.
It's almost like they've forgotten about the Phantom Menace.
Oh wow. Well, it must have. I mean, it was like 4 years ago or 5 years, so they had some time to get over that. But I don't think it's quite as bad. Like I said, there's stuff that I like, but I guess the people who hate it feel like they had a little bit of axe to grind against the celebritydom of it. And the people who love it, I feel like, are really grasping for stuff. It's okay for movies to be just okay. And Ocean's 12 is okay. I had a fun time watching it, right? I think you did to a degree.
I mean, nobody sets out to make a movie that's just okay. I mean, they thought they were making something that was as good or better than Ocean's 11 when they were making it.
Yeah. I'm sure, the intentions are good, but it's one of those things that you get involved, like once the snowball starts going downhill, it becomes an avalanche. And I feel like the avalanche was, this knee jerk to celebrities hanging out in Europe, which hanging out in Vegas, I guess, is totally fine, but
because we can hang out in Vegas, but when they start going places we can't go, that's when we turn on them.
Shame. But I do, like I said, I don't think it's one of the worst, but I do think it errs on the side of not being successful, because I don't know anybody who can come in and say what this movie is. Like, it's not a really successful heist movie because the narrative rules it breaks. People have tried to call it a hangout movie. I don't think it's a hangout movie at all. I don't get that sense because, like you said, the characters, other than like Rusty and Catherine Zeta-Jones, who's brand new and we don't really know anything about her, like anything particular or meaningful about her until the last 7 minutes of the film. So it's not a character-driven movie. It's not really a hangout movie. The heist breaks these narrative rules. So I don't think it has enough of an identity that you can really say is really great. But at the same time, there's enough stuff to make it really good. And as to Matt Singer's point, there's a problem that I have with deconstructive narratives. And if Matt's going to say, well, how heist movies are going to work, so why don't we just not do a heist movie, but, still call it a heist movie, but just have fun with it or play with it or, for lack of a better term, deconstruct it. But the problem I have with that is similar to, this is a lightning rod of a movie, get your emails ready, is The Last Jedi. Is another sequel that attempts to deconstruct what came before. But it's easy to say, forget all that stuff. We're done with kill the past, as The Last Jedi actually says. Kill the past, bury it, whatever. Ocean's 12 is not doing that too specifically, but it is kind of turning up its nose and almost flipping the middle finger to the idea of like, this is what you thought how the heist would go, but ultimately we really didn't care. But you can break things, but what's harder is putting them back together. Okay, fine. Kill the past. This is not what the heist movie is going to be. This is not what a Star Wars movie is anymore. Well, then what is it now? Okay, it's easy to break things, harder to build them. So what is it now? So if you are going to take that Singer stance, if you are going to go that Rian Johnson Last Jedi, what is the thing that you are now replacing what you broke? And neither really answer that question. And that's, I don't think you can get away with that. I can't say like, yeah, okay, it was good enough that you said, poo-poo to that thing and moved on. You have to then do the narrative heavy lifting of now saying, okay, it's not this, then what is it then?
Well said, Mike. But there were some notable dissents. Roger Ebert gave it 3 stars because that's what Ebert does. And I've ranted enough, so why don't you give us the good news?
Oh, yeah, sure. I mean, Roger, I have it right here. He says, this isn't a caper movie at all. It's an improvisation of caper themes. If at times it seems like a caper, well, as the fellow said when he got up from the piano, it might not be Beethoven, but it has a lot of the same notes. Rather than describe other targets such as a priceless jeweled egg, I will observe that all the targets are MacGuffins, that it matters not what they go after, but how they do it and what they say in the process. The movie is all about behavior, dialogue, star power, and wise-ass in-jokes. I really sort of liked it. Which is funny because that's the opposite of what she said.
Yeah.
Todd McCarthy of Variety also liked it, saying, it's the most high-end junk food imaginable, completely unnourishing and forgettable afterward, but delicious and all but impossible not to enjoy while it's in front of you.
I mean, it's certainly possible not to enjoy it, but despite all my complaints, I wasn't, miserable. I just wanted a lot more. I mean, not more plot and characters and distractions. I just wanted a more better movie. And maybe it is the kind of movie that's review proof. Having talked so much about the critical response, maybe it's actually review proof. And it's kind of like sending a top restaurant critic to review a Big Mac and fries.
Welcome to the world of Punches and Popcorn, where we dive into the bone-breaking and kung-fu-kicking world of martial arts cinema. Join us on the path as we explore a new movie every episode, discussing the history, fighting styles, science, and more from a broad range of fight films. Everything from Bruce Lee to Jean-Claude Van Damme to John Wick. There's plenty of room in our temple of couch potato style. So listen in and subscribe to Punches and Popcorn on your favorite podcast app.
Mike, how did it do at the box office?
It didn't quite outdo Ocean's 11, but still hit the jackpot. Its opening weekend raked in $39 million, about $1 million more than Ocean's 11, and went on to earn $125 million domestic, $237 million international, for a total haul of more than $362 million worldwide. Ocean's 11, remember, made $183 million domestically, so it had longer legs, and another $267 million internationally, for a worldwide haul of $450 million. 11's budget of $85 million was also significantly less than 12's budget of $110 million. But I guess it was a lot harder to keep costs down when everybody was sure it would be another big hit.
I mean, that's a big budget for Soderbergh. I wonder if it's got to be his biggest budget yet, right?
Yeah.
It has to be.
I don't know if it might even be his biggest budget ever, because even Ocean's 13, which we'll get to, is smaller. They go back to Vegas. It's very self-contained. I'd be interested to look that up.
Yeah,
it might be.
We'll try to update you in a future pod, but I bet that is his biggest, because I mean, even like Traffic wasn't. It was like 50 million or something. It was not even close.
That's right. Yeah, I mean, it was like half this. Geez, and much longer too.
Yeah, much longer film with plenty of characters.
Yeah, so the per minute price was pretty good. It's an interesting time. So it landed 10th. It was the 10th highest grossing movie of 2004. And that was a pretty cool year for film. I have a few things for us here. So in 2004, we're starting to see the age of the franchise. The top grossing movie of the year was Shrek 2, which would give us 2 more movies and a few spin-offs. The third Harry Potter movie was the second highest grossing film, and the third highest grossing movie was Sam Raimi's Spider-Man 2, which, while terrific, we know where that ultimately led us. You still have some original big budget fare being made. Troy, another Brad Pitt movie. The Day After Tomorrow, National Treasure, even though that would spawn a whole lot more capital C content.
I want to get like a little sound bite that we can play. This says the word content the way Svengoolie says Berwyn. Content.
I'm sure we can find David Zaslav saying content in the most horrible way possible. But the groundwork's being laid for what's to come in terms of, like, again, universes, tentpoles being built. But that's not to say all is lost, because indie small budget cinema is still alive and well. Alexander Payne released Sideways, which was a critical and box office success, and it garnered a bunch of awards.
Yeah, I mean, what a miraculous unicorn that was, right? A character-driven comedy that was good, highly entertaining, and wildly successful.
Yeah. Yeah, and didn't really have much star power in Paul Giamatti, sort of. I mean, Thomas Hayden Church hadn't been around since like Wings, basically.
Yeah.
Sandra Oh wasn't a star yet. Virginia Madison, who I love, who I think is terrific. You know, no real big names involved with that, and it managed to muscle its way up.
And what it did for the Merlot industry alone. Those vintners couldn't believe their luck.
Finally, so the wine growers get some love. Soderbergh's old pal from the Human Nature days, Michel Gondry, released Eternal Sunshine's Spotless Mind. Primer came out. Napoleon Dynamite was a smash. And Garden State left its emo mark.
And did a lot for the Shins. Yeah.
Yeah. Hey, that's not bad. And another indie darling, also like Soderbergh, went the sequel route, a little different. An indie darling and also former fellow baseball prospect, Richard Linklater, followed up his iconic 90s movie Before Sunrise, which is a movie I adore. Many of us do. He followed up with Before Sunset, which is equally as good, if it's not better. And finally, in 2004, the old guard had a year. Scorsese's The Aviator was a hit. Michael Mann had Collateral, which is a hit. And Mike Nichols' penultimate movie, Closer, and he's one of Soderbergh's icons, also did really well at box office. And I think it also did well in award season.
You've made me feel a lot better about that year.
Yeah, well, it's funny. I look at the early aughts and I'm like, I don't remember any really great years, but 2004 was solid.
And what an amazing deep cut to the Richard Linklater being the like the baseball connection and making a sequel. I mean, that's just one of those weird things that if you did a proposition bet, you could have cleaned up 100-1.
Yeah, no kidding. And another connection, Richard Linklater was in Soderbergh's The Underneath. Remember, he was the
right.
He was working the door.
Right, working the door.
Yeah, all comes together.
That's the kind of research we bring you on the Filmographers podcast.
I watched all these movies. I watched all the 2004 movies for this, just so I can mention them properly.
That is hard work.
So, to be clear, nobody was asking for a sequel. The studio wasn't asking for a sequel. None of the actors were asking for a sequel. This is something that I generated. And then you can absolutely be sure that after 12, nobody was asking for another one. And I was the one that went to the studio and went to the cast and said, I have another idea. I think it's an idea that'll close everything out and be fun to do. I get asked a lot. People assume because they're Ocean's movies that I must not be. How could I be as emotionally attached to them as other more serious films? And I don't know what they're talking about. I'm very invested in these.
Sure is a lot of fun to make them.
Mike, I have two big questions today. The first one is, did Soderbergh betray his creative principles in making Ocean's 12? In his previous 13 movies, he showed again and again a reluctance to make things easy on himself or to go back to the creative well. He constantly pushed himself to tackle new subject matter, new modes of filmmaking, and new ways of working. But for Ocean's 12, no matter how many new twists he tried to put into the story, he was working with most of the same cast, on a related story and the same intellectual property. So, Mike, did Soderbergh get lazy?
I mean, that's a great question. And I thought about this a lot. And it's funny, before recording this, I actually found an interview with Soderbergh around this time where he says he's going to, after this or around this time, is going to be taking a year off, which is remarkable for him, given his pace. But I think, I don't know if he's lazy or getting burnt out, because we talked about in Solaris something similar, that Solaris could have used some more development time.
Yeah.
Like, I don't think he quite had a handle, and I think you'd agree, of like what exactly he was trying to do with that. I don't think he really did enough to pre-production for the visual design of the movie. He went his usual run and gun, and sometimes when you do that, it comes off a little bit. There's a lot of risk. It can come off sloppy, it can come off inconsistent or incoherent or just lacking. And I think that Solaris was a little lacking. Now, in Ocean's 12, I think he's trying to do something. Like he has this Euro influence. He's trying to, we both said that to Catch a Thief thing. He's trying to do something. It just feels like, and I think you said it best. And I think this really points to the answer. Like they were writing it on quickly. They were making changes on set. They're doing all these things in an attempt. I'm not exactly sure in an attempt to where they were trying to get to, like what the North Star was for this movie. But the fact that it went so fast on the back of another movie, doing it on the doing it on the run while they're actually filming, like. I just think that like his method is breaking down a little bit and he can't work at this frenzy, fast and furious pace every single time. It seems like he's not going as fast as like the 6 months for Traffic or anything like that, but still fast and still no real breaks in between these movies. So I don't know. I mean, it feels like lazy, and maybe it is because like at the same time, I do think he relied. He talks a lot about how he loves movie stars, like you can put them in something and it works. And for the most part it does. He gets great performances from them. He finds things in some of these actors that no one else is able to find. Julia Roberts being one, George Clooney being another. But I also think he relied on them arguably a little too much. And the fact that like, just point the camera at them and let them be clever and let them be, charming. And that should carry us enough of the way. And it worked in Ocean's 11 because the script was a little sharper and a little bit more put together than it did here. I don't want to blame the screenwriter because it seemed like he was working under pretty tough conditions of like writing as he went, but I think that if he was lazy in any sense, he was relying on star power a little too much. And there's a fine line between charming and smarmy. And like the end scene where Julia Roberts and George Clooney go visit Vincent Cassel, Cassel, I don't know how you French say it. Cassel. Where they're like, oh, well, tell us the story and we'll tell you the best. And then they're like, oh, we did it. We stole it. And it's like, it's so smarmy.
Yeah.
And that's not good. That's not what you want. It's not charming. It's just arrogant. And I think that's, like we said, part of the critical response is feeding off of that. And we like our celebrities to get vaunted, but when they get too vaunted, we as a society, especially American society, we don't take kindly to that. So there is a little bit of a touch in that. And I wish that he would have relied on a little bit more of a clever script and less of clever people.
You make a really good point about maybe just getting burned out or his methods aren't working quite as well for him. I wouldn't seriously suggest that Soderbergh is lazy because he works so hard all the time, but maybe it's like he's working too hard and he's not working smart enough. Maybe a little intellectually lazy, maybe, except that no, because he's trying to overstuff. He's trying to do too much, which maybe it's almost like my answer is getting really convoluted, but it's almost like you need more mental energy and acuity to make it simple. We've talked about this a lot about like when I'm tired, as I'm sounding right now, and my answer is getting more and more all over the place. It's harder to be concise. It's an amazing feat to make one of the movies he's made. Many people try their whole lives to make a Hollywood movie and never make one. He's astonishingly productive. He's astonishingly successful, even with the movies that don't come off well. But it's just hard to kind of work at that high pitch and sustain it, year after year after year, film after film after film. And it does feel like Solaris was lacking. Ocean's 12 is lacking. It does feel like he kind of needs a break and a reset or something like that.
Yeah, and I think you'll know what I mean. I always say like writing, and I think probably I know I've done it. Directing as well. Any sort of creative pursuit is oftentimes you can reduce it to decision making.
Yeah,
like yes to this and no to that and why. And I don't feel like he made enough decisions in Ocean's 12, and decisions being no to these certain things where he was just saying yes to pretty much everything.
It's amazing because there's a quote in the director's commentary, and I didn't write it down, so I'm trying to do this from memory, but he says something about decision making. He says something like, basically, as a director, you're being asked to make decision after decision after decision, and if you can make them all, eventually you'll have a movie. but making decisions is tough when you get tired, and it's tough to maintain that kind of true north or something. But I want to get, with my second question, I want to get to something that you also were touching on in your answer to my first question, which is about the stars, more or less. This question is, like, I don't mean to suggest in any way that he doesn't care about the finished product, because we know he does. Sometimes he goes a little too far with, editing and recutting and whatever. But he's also gone on record saying, like, his favorite part of filmmaking is making the movie, right? Now, we also know he loves actors, and he loves these actors, and he loves stars, and he likes being with them. Is there a danger to audiences when filmmakers enjoy the process and the camaraderie of filmmaking a little too much?
I mean, yeah, I think there is. I think, like any sort of, and I hesitate to use this word, like addiction, but like the rush of doing it, has become his life for like 5 years. And like when something becomes your life for so long, like you don't know how to do something else, but it's different for different directors. I'm sure, I've read like Kubrick enjoyed making the films, like he enjoyed, and that took him a long time, but he enjoyed that process. Like that is how he worked, and that's what he took pleasure in. Fincher too, like I'm just gonna guess, but he's done it again and again, so I'm assuming he takes like some pleasure in from like the painstaking detail and however long it takes him to do his shots and how many takes he's gonna do. Like he's enjoying it because maybe it is more of enjoyment of the end product. I don't know. But like everyone's getting some enjoyment, I think, on some level. And Soderbergh has his enjoyment of like the process as well. And particularly the actors. But I do think there's that danger of like losing your objectivity, of like, yeah, you're going to do the thing, but are you ready to do it? Are you in a position to do it? And I think he got comfortable with just like jumping in from one thing to the next, that maybe he stopped asking that question of like, wait a second, am I ready to make this movie? Like, is this movie ready for cameras to roll? Is the script ready? Are these actors prepared? Are we where we need to be? Because recent history had taught him he could just jump in and go and win Oscars for it, So maybe he kind of lost that sense of like, taking a step back and really looking like, is this project ready? Can I make it ready? And he's been able to, but sometimes you can't.
It's interesting because some of these other film directors you cited, I feel like they almost have a hard time finishing their movies because they like the process so much they don't want it to be done, or they're just such perfectionists that they can't finish it. At least Soderbergh can finish a project. He's almost more about like, well, let me do another one.
Yeah, that's a great point.
But on the hanging out thing, it's interesting because like I think we've all seen these comedies, many of them starring Will Ferrell, where it seems like they're having so much fun, but it doesn't translate for the audience. It feels like they were just like, well, we're funny people. If we show up and we're kooky, it's gonna translate to laughs, and that's a different kind of filmmaking. But I do think that there is sometimes a danger in just being like, well, we know what we're doing, we'll figure it out. And Soderbergh usually does figure it out, but Ocean's 12, I don't think he necessarily figured it out too much. And like the final thing I kind of want to get into just a little bit is that like Soderbergh has said, I don't think I said this yet, this is his favorite of the Ocean's movies, which is so wild.
That surprises me.
And I think that, maybe he's being a little bit contrarian, maybe he's being a little defensive because other people don't like it quite as much. I will say that the more I kind of look at it and the more I listen to him talking about what he was trying to achieve, the more I feel a little bit charitable about it. And weirdly, almost like Full Frontal, I kind of thought like, well, with a few more viewings, I'd probably like pick up on all the stuff he was trying to do, but you shouldn't have to watch it 2 or 3 times to get into the director's vision of it at all. And he says he likes it the most because it's the most character driven. But, is it really character driven, or is he just letting his actors and his characters kind of run the show? Are they all having a little too much fun? I know you said it's not a hangout film, but like if we want to like edge it into that universe, we could say like they're making a hangout film by hanging out. Yeah. I mean, to me, it does feel at times like a little bit like that, and I agree with you that it's not a valid criticism to say like, oh, movie stars, getting to travel around Europe, because they can go do that anytime the hell they want. But there sometimes does feel like this creeping sense of like, they are just having a little too much fun on set.
Yeah, and I think you made a great point, and I agree with that completely. The whole idea of like, just point the camera at funny people and funny things will happen.
Yeah,
and I think he fell into this trap of like, point the camera at pretty talented people and good things will happen. And it didn't. I think they got lost in the haze of like, they were having a good time. They're staying at Clooney's place. All these things are happening, and maybe that did contribute to the loss of focus, which this movie definitely suffers from a loss of focus.
Yeah.
Like, I enjoy the ride. I can watch it. And I hate saying this. I hate saying that I can turn off my brain and watch it and be okay with it. I can, because it looks good. Although some of the technical stuff I think doesn't look good. I think that like the available lighting often doesn't work in this movie. Like it gets too shadowy and too dark. I think let the actors block themselves doesn't work often, because people pop in and out of frame in really weird ways. Well, this is getting worse and worse for Soderbergh.
Well, if you get tired of looking at it, you can always close your eyes and listen to it, because this is, I will say, one of the best soundtracks of a Soderbergh film. It's terrific.
Yes. Okay.
The David Holmes score is excellent. The first one was really good. Ocean's 11, Ocean's 12. This one's great. I love listening to it.
Yes, we can say one really, really thing we love about this movie without a but. The music is great.
It's a great, great soundtrack. And if Soderbergh is, getting a little lost in, the eyes of George Clooney, well, who among us wouldn't want to gaze at those? But, get a room already, Steve and George.
Then they're not done. They still got a few more movies.
They're not done.
They're not done.
One of the great bromances of modern film history.
Oh, I will tell you this. I will tease this. This is probably not just giving it away. Ocean's 12 is not my least favorite Ocean's movie.
Interesting. Maybe more fireworks will go off
when we get to.
Well, we can't blame that one on Soderbergh. Well, I think we should leave it there. Listeners, do you love Ocean's 12? Hate it? Feel completely and utterly indifferent to it? Be sure to let us know. You can reach us on Instagram at The Filmographers, on X at FilmographerPod, and on Letterboxd at Filmographers. Or send us a good old-fashioned email at thefilmographerspodcast@gmail.com. If you've enjoyed this episode, please subscribe on your platform of choice. And for the love of God, don't channel Stephen Hunter's review of Ocean's 12. Channel Roger Ebert instead. Be charitable. If you really want to show your support and help us keep doing more deep dives into directors' filmographies, find us on Patreon at patreon.com/thefilmographerspodcast. Every dollar makes it easier for us to produce this show and share our passion for movies with you. Thanks in advance. And as always, thanks to Kevin Lau, our producer, Gompson, who composed and played our theme music, and Cosmo Graff, who designed our logo. Join us next week on the Filmographers Podcast, when we'll discuss what is either Soderbergh's worst or merely least understood film, Bubble. Soderbergh reunited with the screenwriter of Full Frontal? I can hardly wait. Or maybe I can.